Even though I really can't tell you anything about this guy besides Honorable Space Ninja, I do gotta be real with y'all. This is a pretty cool skin. But I also didn't have to spend any plat for it, so that probably adjusts my opinion a little bit relative to the average Warframe player. But anyways, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about Ashe again, which might surprise some of you because my recent Ashe video, and I say recent as in 6 months ago, that Ashe video is still kind of relevant. But you know that every time a Warframe gets a proto skin, I gotta drop another video in your feed because you're looking for it right now. So let's go over what makes Ashe, in my opinion, one of the stronger Warframes in 2026, and in some cases, one of the strongest. Ashe's passive is very simple. Slash status effects inflicted on enemies do 25% increased damage and last 50% longer. I can preview this? What is that? I'm clicking the preview button, but it doesn't do anything interesting. Yeah, this one does exactly what it says, nothing else. Slash is very useful because it is what Bladestorm deals, so this is a pretty huge damage buff for all that Ashe does. Ashe's first ability is Shuriken. Upon casting, you will launch 5 Shurikens towards any enemies within 60 meters and 90 degrees of your reticle. They deal slash damage with a 10% status chance and a singular forced proc, so yes, you can get more than 1 slash per cast, but this ability is pretty bad. Not even gonna front you a little bit. I know that that's probably a little antithetical to what I said about Ashe before, but yeah, this is the helmet slot on this Warframe because this one doesn't do anything. Yes, you can headshot them for more damage, and yes, it does have an augment that armor strips enemies, but like, okay. The thing about slash damage is that it ignores armor, so we don't care about that for Bladestorm. And whatever weapon we're using is certainly not going to live or die based on whether or not enemies are armor stripped, so this one does get replaced by Wrathful Advance. Smokescreen is his second ability, and when you cast this one, you go invisible. And that's pretty much it. This also applies to your companion, who I don't have equipped right now. This is unconditional invisibility, which means that even if I attack these enemies while under the effects of the ability, you don't lose it. So the thing about this one is that as long as you consistently just remember to press your 2 button every time that your duration runs out, Ashe can't die. And while this is a relatively boring way of surviving, it's pretty much the most effective way to do it in the game. His third ability, Teleport, is a bit more interesting though. Casting requires an enemy, doing so will teleport you to them and automatically execute a back finisher, or if they are within Parazon Mercy range, it will automatically do that, and all attacks are granted a 200% damage bonus. If you kill the enemy with your finisher, you regain 50% of the energy used to kill them. But one of the funny things about this ability for stealth is that during the execution of the animation, the game changes the awareness state of the enemy from unaware, if they are unaware, to aware, so you lose the stealth damage multiplier, which is really powerful. Funnily enough, this is a very bad stealth ability. But let's move on to the actual reason that you are playing Ashe. Like so many of these Gen 1 Warframes, their fourth ability is kinda their whole thing. If you didn't know, Bladestorm is an exalted weapon now, so you do mod it separately from your melee weapon, thank God. Functionality-wise, activating the ability toggles what I like to call marking mode. During this, all you have to do is just put your crosshair near enemies to mark them for death. Each enemy marked will cost you 12 energy, but if you are invisible through smokescreen, it will only cost 6 energy per enemy, and that of course is affected by efficiency. If you recast the ability once you have every enemy you want marked, you will send 2 shadow clones out to each enemy and strike them with a finisher that does 1500 damage and will force proc slash. And because of the new health bar update based on status effects, you can see that some of these statuses will end up killing these enemies. At least, I think, unless it runs out beforehand. Yep, this guy didn't die. That's hilarious. I don't have any mods on my Ashe right now, so we're missing out on a lot of DPS here. But for some other notes, if you leave range of a marked enemy, which at base is 50 meters, they will get unmarked and you will just refund the energy. And there is a synergy here with teleport. If you mark a bunch of enemies and then teleport onto a marked enemy, you will join your shadow clones in a very cool animation going around hitting all of them. Now, I don't know how effective of a usage your time that is when you could just be marking more enemies and stuff, but it does look really cool. And Ashe is probably the biggest aura farmer, especially with this new skin. That's kind of like the only personality trait that I feel like Ryoku has. He just aura farms. And the teleport animation, that's a lot of aura right there. Another important aspect of this ability is the combo part of it. If you look right below my reticle, you'll see that I'm gaining combo, and this works how it does on other exalted melees. You gain more damage for every large number increase that you get, up to 12 times more damage at 12x combo. Now for the Ashe build, this is a very fleshed out setup, but it does use a couple things you're probably not very familiar with, so let's go over it. We are going to build for gas on our Shadow Clones Prime, because the finisher damage that they deal is high enough to the point where triggering a gas cloud to kill enemies that will then walk into the cloud on actual tile sets is more important than running such obnoxious damage that we can one-tap any enemy in the game. This allows you to actually get kills at a relatively fast pace and not need to mark every single enemy to kill them. The clone's attack speed does scale, but is capped at 1.5, so Primed Fury hits that cap automatically, no need to use anything else here. Finisher mods like Finishing Touch do apply and are very strong. Lasting Sting also makes the gas clouds last pretty much double their duration, which is really important. But we do have the slight issue of the status chance being really low. When Weeping Wounds gets all the way stacked up, we will have 33% status chance, but that is still a bit lower than I like, so it's possible you could use the Proton Snap mod to give you another 50% flat status chance, but it does require you to wall latch for 2 seconds every 20 seconds, which most people, myself included, do not enjoy. But if you want to fit this one in there, it will make the build a lot stronger. I'm going to touch on this in a second, but let me talk about the Ashe build first. And yes, this is the best arcane to use on Ashe by far. We're aiming for 2 things here. A ton of critical chance to boost the abysmal base CC of 5% on the blades up to an acceptable number through Wrathful Advance, which we will be able to do pretty successfully. But beyond that, there is a very unique synergy here with the arcane we have on our Shadow Clones. You'll notice that I'm using both Arcane Expertise and Primed Redirection to give my Ashe a ton of shields, which probably feels like a waste because we will be permanently invis through Smokescreen. 226% duration gives us a practically 30-second timer on this ability. But the reason I am using them does not have anything to do with Ashe's own survivability. It has everything to do with melee retaliation, stating that you gain 30% melee damage for every 200 current shields up to 420%, bonus is halved for overshields, blah blah blah. If we look at all of the arcanes present here, Melee Afflictions doesn't do anything, Melee Kareen doesn't do anything, Dowdy doesn't do anything. Yes, technically this works, but building for crit chance with higher crit damage is more effective. This also would work, but we need to trigger gas, and having 240% corrosive weighting would definitely take away from that. Also, elemental damage doesn't do a ton on Ashe, it's really not that good. Why would we need any armor? This doesn't work at all. We would need to dilute our gas weighting for magnetic, and all this does is give us a bunch of initial combo, which we don't really care about, because as long as you just throw 2 of the dexterity arcanes on your art gun, you have like perma infinite combo duration. Yeah, 20 seconds. If you're not hitting at least 1 enemy with the ult every 20 seconds, it's like, are you even playing content where you need to have damage that high? Also, just use Naramon. Regardless, Melee Retaliation is the only arcane that gives us damage for a stat that we can get a ton of very reliably on Ashe. Another benefit that he has about using this arcane is that his shields are not going to fluctuate. We have 2,000 shields, and that gives us a damage bonus, and it's not going to go down at all because we're invisible. We're not getting shot. Besides that though, Wrathful is funny on this build because it low-key replaces Teleport as a better teleport, but I do prefer to keep this one so you can join the clones in the animation. And for those of you who would say you should be using Arcane Fury, the damage that we gain from Retaliation by using Redirection and Expertise is much higher than Arcane Fury. I believe it's 300% more compared to the 180. Crepuscular adds 3 final crit damage to the clones, making all of the crit chance that we get actually worthwhile. Even though it's only at 1.2, it'll become 4.2, on top of another 1.2 from our companion. Primed Flow and Equilibrium are here to manage energy so that we can mark a bunch of enemies. Even though it only costs 6, you don't really want to run out of energy to do that because it is kind of the whole build. I'm using all ability strength shards to get us as close to 300% crit chance as possible. The final build lands, funnily enough, at 299%. With the 5% base from the clones. But for the rest of your loadout, if you want a synergistic primary, you can use the Ferox to pull enemies into the gas clouds with its alt fire. The Latum is a really great weapon that doesn't require any Warframe buffs to kill very easily, so if you run out of energy, you can use this to save yourself. And then the Inodem is a really great finisher weapon. Just make sure you're using at least Blade Twister, and I'll give you the builds on these. Melee Influence allows it to kill really easily if you run out of energy. Here are the Latum evolutions. And here's the build. Xenoric helps with energy. If you have combo issues or you're playing a less enemy dense mission, I would recommend Neramon. And then companion-wise, Panzer. This build right here is going to be more than capable. And I believe that wraps everything up. This isn't as in-depth of a look at all of Ash's stuff as my previous Ash video, but that's because the build has stayed the same. I just wanted to remind you guys of its existence because everybody's going to be looking for a build because this skin is pretty cool. But that's actually also all I can say about Ryoku as a character. Honestly, I think the way that Vina and Ryoku were handled in the quest is probably the worst part about it. Their existence is kind of awful. Not gonna lie. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and that the build does you well. Got some gameplay coming for you right after this. Garuda video to come later this evening, I hope. I'll see you all soon.